Promise me you'll never set foot in the coast house. That was the only request my husband ever delivered, like a command. In 22 years, Matthew softened every hard thing, sanded every edge, except those 5 words. We never argued about them. I tucked them away like a pebble in my pocket and carried on, imagining it was superstition, or a story he'd tell me later when time was generous again. Time was not generous. It stopped on a mild Tuesday in May, and I became a widow who said practical sentences about invoices and flowers, while fault lines split my life into before and after. 2 weeks later, I sat opposite our attorney in his high-rise office, where the windows pretended the city was manageable, and the room smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. Mr. Carr spoke carefully, as if each clause had to cross a river. "There is one final matter," he said, sliding a small, weighty tin across the desk. On its lid, a faded sketch of cypress branches bent by wind. Inside lay a single iron key on a frayed ribbon, and a folded card thick as wedding stationery. My name, Claire, inked in Matthew's precise hand. I heard the ocean before I read the note. If this is in your hands, I can't be in the room to explain. Forgive me. The house on the Monterey coast is now yours. I asked you never to go, and now I'm asking you to go, just once, before you decide anything. Think of it as a tide I couldn't hold back. There are letters waiting for you. Start with the blue-spined book on the second shelf in the study, left of the window. The first letter will tell you where to find the rest. I loved you quietly and then louder every year. M. I pressed the card to my chest and felt the thud of a heart I did not recognize. He owned a house there? I asked, feeling foolish for not knowing. Mr. Carr nodded, discomfort passing over his face, like cloud shadow. Cypress House, he said. He purchased it under a separate trust 6 years ago. All taxes and maintenance are current. There is one additional point. Matthew's colleagues, people from the art world, have reached out. They've expressed strong interest in the property's contents. The property's contents, I repeated, tasting the words. What contents? He hesitated. Your husband made acquisitions in the last decade. Paintings. Notes suggest the house contains a private collection, possibly tied to the West Coast modernists. Given recent whispers about a vanished painter's works resurfacing, the interest isn't surprising. Who's vanished? A name keeps appearing, Lucian Vale. He said it the way one might reference a storm line gathering out at sea. He disappeared in 1983, left behind rumor and half-signed canvases. If there are authentic Vale works in that house, the art market will rattle its silverware. I thought of Matthew's steady salary, his careful spreadsheets, the way he hid extravagance in gestures, not things, fresh peonies, a reel of old film passed through a projector onto our bedroom wall. Paintings by a vanished genius did not fit. Neither did a secret house. Who knows about this? I asked. A handful. A curator in Los Angeles, a dealer in San Francisco, a private lender who has tried to get my office to confirm inventory. Mr. Carr's expression softened. You're under no obligation to entertain anyone. Visit the property. Call me before you speak to them. After I left, I sat in my car with the key in my palm, cold as seawater. The key had a notch like a bite taken out of the moon. I tilted it, and light flashed along its edge. A ridiculous thought rose. He had wanted to give me a lighthouse, then a more sober one. He had wanted to keep me away. I drove north the next morning, following the spine of the state until the highway began to taste of salt. The coastline opened beside me, like a book no one had underlined yet. Pelicans moved like commas above the gray-green surf. Sea fog rolled in and out in long breaths. When the wind nudged the car, it felt like a hand Matthew might have placed there. Cypress House stood at the curve of the land where the bluffs cinched in. Weathered wood, low roofline, glass that faced the horizon as if the house were forever mid-conversation with the Pacific. No neighbors in sight. The gate was a heavy rectangle of reclaimed planks, its latch forged into the shape of a shark's tooth. I slid the iron key into the throat of the lock and felt a clean, resistant click. Inside, the air of a place that had been cared for in silence. The entry floor held pale stone worn to a satin by careful feet. It smelled faintly of salt, cedar, and something citrusy like peel zest hours ago. The living room opened in a long, low sweep, beams running across a ceiling that made you look up even as the windows made you look out. A mantle of driftwood held a single bowl of dried nasturtiums, their color still stubbornly bright. It did not feel haunted. It felt arranged. I recognized Matthew's restraint, the way he would remove one thing and the room would finally breathe. I said his name out loud and then went looking for the study. It was not a grand room. It didn't want to be. The desk sat under a window that framed nothing showier than a slant of sky and the shoulder of a cypress tree dragging its green against the wind. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the opposite wall. Third shelf from the bottom, second from the window. A modest section of cloth-bound volumes, mostly poetry, spines in blues and grays. My hand hovered and then settled on the bluest one, a slim collection whose title I didn't recognize. Inside, at the hinge between two poems, something rough kissed my finger. An envelope. My name again. The paper smelled faintly of bergamot and, impossibly, of his cologne, the one he'd worn only when we went somewhere we couldn't afford. Claire, if you've opened the right book, you're already better at this than I dared hope. The house is in a gallery. It's a map. The first place to look is never the obvious one. Find the next letter where water waits without moving. And please breathe. There's more joy than trouble here, though trouble will try to be first in the door. M. Where water waits without moving. I thought of the kettle, no. The rain barrel? The little fountain I hadn't seen yet? I walked through the house, listening. The kitchen held a sink big enough to bathe a collie, empty bowls. A neat row of knives resting on their sides like fish. Nothing. The bathroom off the hallway had a deep tub, porcelain gleaming, on the windowsill. A jar of sea glass the color of diluted ink. Not there. In the pantry, I found shelves of preserved lemons. In the laundry, a basin with a coiled hose. In the small sunroom, a bowl wide as a park hat dry. I opened the back door and stepped onto the flagstone. A narrow rill ran along the edge of the patio, its surface still as thought. When I knelt, the skin of the water reflected my face and, faintly, a gull cutting a ragged white across the sky. On the underside of the stone lip, tucked in the shadow where wet met dry, a second envelope waited in a sheath of wax paper. You found it, title girl. I read the line twice, as if it might change. Inside the main bedroom closet, the back panel looks like cedar, but isn't. The right edge will lift if you persuade it with a butter knife. Behind it is a small vault. The code is not a number, it's a sequence of notes. You'll see the tiny piano on the shelf, like the one we found in that antique shop in Santa Fe. Play the phrase you hum when you wash dishes. It unlocks what I couldn't say out loud. Before you open it, sit down. If you're not seated, you'll blame me for the fall. And try not to hate me for knowing more than I said. I stood up too fast, and the horizon tilted, then corrected itself like a good sailor. In the bedroom, the air felt cooler, as if the room remembered every window that had ever been opened. The closet was long enough to count steps inside. On the top shelf sat a child's toy grand, black lacquer dulled by dust, the kind with real little keys and a voice like a tinkling bell. I would have laughed if my hands hadn't started to shake. The back panel did what he promised. Lifted at the edge when I slid the dull knife beneath it. A matte metal door revealed itself. No glowing keypad, no theatrics. Just a strip of ivory with 5 notches carved into it, and beneath the strip, a slit the width of a mouth. The toy piano waited at elbow height, its lid propped like a wing. I pressed the first note of the tune I had hummed for years without thinking. The one I didn't know I hummed. The one he must have memorized just by loving me. 3 notes up, hold. 2 down, 1 up. Pause. The last falls like a penny in a jar. The panel shivered. A click opened the vault, not louder than a spoon placed carefully on a saucer. Inside floated the low, steady scent of linen long stored and something darker underneath. Linseed oil, old varnish, a whisper of turpentine. A shallow drawer slid forward on silent rails, and the room brightened, though no light had changed. Wrapped in unbleached cotton lay a canvas not framed, but taut on its stretcher, the paint surface matte. Its colors the sea makes when a storm is a rumor. A signature in the lower right, tiny, tense, and unmistakable even to someone who has only ever read catalogs in waiting rooms. Elvale. My first instinct was to call Matthew by his whole name, the full syllables that mean come look, you won't believe it. The second was to shut the drawer. The third was to cry, not because of money, though the air hummed with that word now, but because I recognized what he'd done. He had turned a house into a confession. He knew I would come. He knew I would find this first. I didn't touch the canvas. I read it the way you read a face. A woman stood at the lip of a coastscape where the sky is bruised but not bleeding. Her body faced the water, her head turned toward something you couldn't see. Her hair was the hesitant brown of eelgrass in winter. There was a hint of a red scarf in the crook of her elbow, as if she had set down a piece of herself for a moment to feel the weather with both hands. The paint was sure and weary at once. People who think emotion is a performance never paint like this. Behind the first drawer, a second, smaller. Inside, paper tied with faded ribbon, edges browned, ink the color of tea forgotten in sunlight. The top letter bore a date from the year I met Matthew. The handwriting wasn't his. It was older, a little defiant. I read my name before I read anything else and felt the room lean closer. To Claire Hart. You don't know me. I knew the man you married. He came to me when the world was smaller and left when it grew too big. If you are reading this, he has asked you to do what he could not. Tell the truth. There are more. Letters. You'll find them where stories pretend to sleep. Not the study. Books there are for visitors. The real library hides behind the fireplace. Pull the shell on the right. The flue will sigh. LV. My hands went fainter than my voice. No, I told the empty room. We're not doing secret doors. But the house was smiling privately, and I knew how this would go. Back in the living room, the fireplace wore a mantle lined with small things Matthew loved and never named. A shard of pottery with 3 blue dots. A tiny brass fish with a mouth like a perfect O. A scallop shell the color of old ivory with a small fracture at the edge. I touched the shell and felt a resistance, then the soft unsealing of a latch long closed. Inside the firebox, the brick panel on the right eased open half an inch. Cold air threaded in. I gripped the edge and pulled. Beyond was a narrow passage, dust fine as talc on the floor, walls close enough to whisper to. A light switch waited exactly where my hand searched for it. On came a low beam, gentle and amber. Matthew's wariness about harsh lights was everywhere here, and a few steps later I found the room. Calling it a library felt insufficient. It was an antechamber between silence and speech. Shelves rose to the ceiling and turned on hidden hinges. A table ran along the center, like a boat keel. A ladder slid on iron rails without a squeak. The air was cathedral cool and smelled of paper that had absorbed a century of weather. On the table lay 3 books, each banded with ribbon the color of dried bay leaves. Under the ribbon, letters thin as breath, tucked deep into pages and spines. Some bore the neat initial Lam, some the impatient LV. Others were unsigned entirely, as if the idea of a name would have been a kind of betrayal. I didn't reach for them. Not yet. The ocean made itself heard through the glass on the far side, a long hush and then a lean against the bluff. I stood in the doorway and understood. The house wasn't a vault full of objects. It was a choreography of reveals. He had wanted this timing, this route, this breath. He had wanted me to take one step and then the next. I chose the thinnest ribbon and undid it the way one undoes a child's hair, careful not to tug. Inside the first book, a photography monograph of fog, was a letter addressed not to me, but to the woman who will walk into my absence without hating me for leaving. The pages trembled in my hands, and I forced myself to read without skipping ahead. You will wonder why I kept this quiet. You, who made a life from telling the truth gently. I can only tell you part of it now, and leave the rest to the letters I've hidden where we once promised each other we would never hide anything. I found, by accident, by luck, by obsession, what scholars had been sniffing around for decades, Vale's lost coastal years. The paintings no one could prove. I bought some. I borrowed some. I traded my certainty for them. There are receipts, there are nots. There are people who will insist these works belong in museums, or in their vaults, or in their names. Before you meet them, I need you to know what I did was not for a headline. It was for the shape of a life we could live near this water, in a house where no one raised their voice. I'm sorry, I asked you to stay away while I was building the thing I meant to put in your hands. I looked down at my fingers and saw that I had pressed a half moon into the old ribbon. I set it aside, ashamed of the mark, as if an archivist might scold me from a shadowed corner. Back in the entry, the bell rang, high and unfamiliar, a sound warmed by age. I froze, the letter hovering like a small bird between my hands. Through the front window, the driveway lay in a quiet curve of gravel. A slate sedan waited at the gate the way a cat waits on a fence, poised, sure of itself, pretending patience. 3 people climbed out. They did not look like family. They looked like people who rehearse how to enter a room. The first was a woman in a dark jacket that fit her like a promise. She had a gallery owner's smile, soft until it decided not to be. The second wore a linen suit and an expression of compressed civility. The third carried a flat case I recognized from auctions, the kind meant for transporting paintings that never feel safe in the world. The bell rang again, gentler this time, and then a knock you perform when you know the law is on your side, even if it isn't. I set the letter on the hallway table, slid the shell panel back into place with a quiet click, and smoothed my sweater as if ironed confidence lived in its threads. When I opened the door, the woman with the impeccable jacket stepped forward, hand outstretched, eyes cataloging everything, my face, the hallway, the shape of the rooms beyond. "Ms. Hart," she said, voice tuned to the neutral key of cultural institutions. "I'm Ava North from the Bay Shore Gallery. This is Dr. Lowell from Pacifica Institute and Mr. Cade from Westward Insurance. We're terribly sorry for your loss. We hoped we might talk with you about works in your care." "In my care?" I repeated as if learning a language. "Yes." Her smile thinned by a millimeter. "It's important that we verify the condition of certain items. There's some urgency. Our concern is stewardship." "I appreciate your concern," I said, letting the salt air rinse the conversation. "Unfortunately, it's not a good time. We're happy to wait." Dr. Lowell lifted the case an inch. "We've brought standard documentation, so there's no confusion later." Behind them, the ocean threw itself against the base of the world, foam fanning, then folding back like a sheet. I thought of Matthew's second letter. More joy than trouble, though trouble will try to be first in the door, and felt the smallest, most dangerous part of me smile. "Then you'll understand if we start with clarity," I said, and stepped aside just enough to let the light fall between us without inviting anyone in. "Before any conversation about objects, we'll talk about letters." "Letters." Ava's brows lifted with practiced surprise. "Yes," I said, hearing my voice steadier than my pulse. "The ones that explain how this house came to hold the things you think belong to you." Wind lifted the edges of the nasturtiums on the mantel behind me, painting the room with a restless orange. In the doorway, we held our arranged smiles. The Pacific kept breathing. And the house where water remembers, listened, already storing the next sentence for the moment I would most need it. Ava North's perfume was deliberate. Something dry, mineral, expensive enough to imply seriousness. She stood just outside the threshold, smiling with the control of someone who never forgot she was being observed. Behind her, the ocean flared silver. Behind me, the house breathed its patient, invisible rhythm. "I'll be brief," she said. "Matthew and I collaborated on a restoration project years ago. Lost West Coast modernists. He acted as intermediary for several acquisitions, some of which are believed to be here. We'd simply like to verify provenance." "Provenance," I repeated. "That's a pleasant word for ownership." She gave a tiny diplomatic nod. "For truth." Her companions stayed half a step behind. The man in the linen suit, Dr. Lowell, held the stillness of someone used to museum air. His eyes flicked past me toward the interior, cataloging without moving. The younger one, Cade, carried his flat case like a secret. "I understand this is difficult," Ava continued, "but there's growing speculation about a series of veil paintings that vanished in the 80s. If those are here, they shouldn't remain undocumented." "Shouldn't," I echoed. "That's a gentle imperative." Her gaze softened. "Matthew wouldn't have wanted a scandal." That sentence landed like a pebble dropped into deep water. No splash, just widening ripples. Matthew wouldn't have wanted a scandal. The way she said his name, low and personal, was not the way colleagues speak of one another. My pulse sharpened. "You knew him well?" I asked. A slight pause. Half a breath too long to be innocent. "Professionally," she said. Lowell cleared his throat, rescuing her. "If we could perhaps have 10 minutes to photograph the collection." "There is no collection," I interrupted. "Just a house and the person who was told never to enter it." Cade shifted his weight, impatient. "Mrs. Hart, we're here under the impression that certain works were entrusted to your husband on loan. We have documentation that suggests—" "Documentation," I said. "Wonderful. You'll show me." He blinked, then nodded and opened the case. Inside lay a folder thick with photocopied letters, purchase receipts, typed correspondence. One page bore my husband's signature, his unmistakable, though dated only a year before his death. The letterhead read Bay Shore Gallery, San Francisco. The language was dry, contractual, but the final line hit me like a cold gust. "And upon the event of my passing, I request the immediate notification of Ava North for proper transfer and safekeeping of all works bearing the mark LV." I steadied myself against the doorframe. "May I?" I asked and took the page. His handwriting, the same steady hand that used to leave me notes on the kitchen counter. "Coffee's on, love you, the tide's high today, now bound to legal phrases about transfer and safekeeping." The words looked foreign dressed in law. "I'd like copies," I said quietly. "Of course," Ava answered. "But we really do need access to confirm the state of the pieces." Behind her, the wind turned sharp. Sea spray feathered across the gravel. The house felt alert, as if it could hear through the walls. I thought of Matthew's first letter. There's more joy than trouble here, though trouble will try to be first in the door. Trouble was standing right there, in a linen suit and polite shoes. I smiled faintly. "The problem is, Ms. North, I haven't found any art. Nothing beyond what you'd expect from a man who loved blank walls." She studied me as though I were a text she couldn't yet translate. "Then perhaps we can help you look." Something in her tone, not suggestion, but assumption, hardened my spine. "Not today," I said, and gently closed the door before her reply could escape. Through the glass, I watched them stand, momentarily stunned, before retreating toward the car. Ava turned once, shading her eyes from the glare, gaze sweeping the windows as if she might still glimpse him there, not me. Then they were gone, the hum of the engine folding into the ocean's endless exhale. Only then did I realize my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a dangerous kind of exhilaration. The kind you feel when you know a secret is about to change shape. I locked the door and leaned against it, eyes on the sealed envelope I'd left on the table, the one signed LV. I'd only read the first half. My chest felt too small for everything waiting inside it. Back in the hidden library, the light had shifted. Afternoon poured in sideways through the high-slit window, turning the dust into gold. I opened the letter fully. If they come to you, and they will, remember this. Truth in the art world is a coin with two faces, both counterfeit. Matthew wanted to prove something he should have left alone. He believed Vale was still alive. He believed I could help him find proof. Tell no one until you've read the letters behind the last shelf. You'll know which one when you hear the wall breathe. The wall breathe. That phrase made my scalp prickle. I crossed to the far end of the room, running my fingers along the rows of spines. Some books were new, others bore the sweet decay of age. At the highest shelf, behind a row of old exhibition catalogs, I felt a pulse, faint but unmistakable. Air, warm and steady, as though the house exhaled from behind the plaster. "Matthew," I whispered, "what did you build here?" I pressed gently, and a section of shelving pivoted inward on a hidden hinge. A small recess appeared, dark, lined in cedar. Inside lay another envelope, this one thicker, bound with a red cord. A scent of salt and turpentine escaped as I opened it. Inside were photographs, black and white, slightly faded, each stamped with dates from the early 80s. The images showed the Monterey Cliffs, the same curve of coastline visible from the house, but decades younger. And in one of them, standing before an unfinished canvas, was a man I knew only from museum reproductions, Lucien Vale. He was alive, or had been long after he was declared gone. The next photo startled me more. Beside him stood a woman, hair loose, smile half-guarded, a scarf around her neck the same red as in the painting hidden in the vault. Her face was turned slightly away, but something about the line of her jaw tugged at recognition. Not mine, but kin to mine, like an echo through generations. Beneath the photos, a short note in Matthew's handwriting. He called her Mira, said she was the reason he stayed hidden. I think she was my mother. The room tilted, the air thinned. Matthew's mother had died before I met him. That much he'd told me. A quiet, creative woman who left few traces. I'd seen one photograph, blurred, indistinct, taken in shadow. But this was clarity. Vale, the vanished painter, and Mira Hart, the woman who became Matthew's mother. My husband had been searching for proof that the man the art world mythologized was the father he'd never known. I sat at the long table, letters spread before me, and the realization struck like a wave breaking too close. All those secret years, the hidden house, the sealed vault, it wasn't greed or scandal he feared. It was identity. He'd been restoring not art, but bloodline. Outside, the sea darkened. Evening fog drew its gray veil over the cliffs. The house creaked softly as if stretching. I returned the photographs to their envelope and locked the library door behind me. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked almost like someone else. Older, sharper, aware. The ache in my chest had shifted shape. No longer grief alone, but a quickening curiosity, the kind that can be dangerous if you feed it. I brewed tea I didn't drink, sat at the desk beneath the window, and unfolded Matthew's first letter again, tracing the signature like it might answer. A faint sound interrupted, not the sea, not the settling wood. A car door, distant but distinct. Then another. I crossed to the window. Ava's sedan was back. This time she wasn't alone. A second vehicle idled behind hers, unmarked, angular government plane. Two silhouettes inside. I felt the shift in the air before the knock came. Sharp. Official. The house seemed to hold its breath. I opened the door an inch. The man on the step wasn't one of Ava's companions. He was taller, his coat unbranded, his expression unreadable. He held an identification wallet at chest level, and even before I focused on the seal, I knew this wasn't about art. "Mrs. Hart?" he asked, voice even. "Agent Price, Bureau of Cultural Assets." I believe you've recently inherited a property of interest to the Federal Registry. I stared at him, pulse steady but loud in my ears. Behind him, Ava stood back, eyes downcast now, no longer the assured gallery emissary, but something closer to uneasy witness. Yes, I said carefully. I have. He glanced past me toward the hall. Then I'm afraid we'll need to talk about Lucian Vale. The world, for one breath, stopped moving, as if even the tide outside was listening. The man at my door carried authority the way others carry cologne. Not a badge flashed, not a gun shown, just presence, heavy and exact. Agent Price, Bureau of Cultural Assets. The title alone sounded unreal, like something invented for a movie about stolen art and forgotten men. "May I come in?" he asked. It wasn't really a question. Still, I hesitated, palm flat against the doorframe. The sea behind him was an unending argument, gray and restless. Ava North stood, farther back now, arms crossed, her expression caught between satisfaction and fear, as if she'd opened a door she no longer wanted to step through. "Do you have a warrant?" I asked. He smiled faintly, not cruelly, but like someone who respected the attempt. "Not yet. I'm hoping we can avoid that. Then you'll wait on the porch." His gaze met mine for a long beat. I expected pushback. Instead, he nodded. "Fair enough." He stayed where he was, coat collar lifting slightly in the wind. "Your husband, Matthew Hart, we have reason to believe he was in possession of material connected to an ongoing international investigation. Paintings attributed to Lucian Vale." I forced my voice to stay level. "Connected how?" "Recovered, concealed, restored. We're still determining which." I glanced toward Ava. "And you brought a gallery director to assist with federal matters." "She's a cooperating consultant," he said smoothly. "Her gallery was one of several through which the alleged works circulated." "Alleged," I repeated. "You make it sound like they're contraband." "Art can be," he replied almost gently. The air between us held too many implications. I decided to give him the smallest truth. "My husband left letters," I said. "He mentioned Vale, but not crimes. Just unanswered questions." Price studied me, eyes gray-green like sea glass under fog. "Would you be willing to let me see them?" "No." His mouth twitched, not quite amusement, not quite irritation. "Mrs. Hart, this isn't about suspicion of wrongdoing. It's about protecting Providence before 100 lawyers and half of Europe start claiming ownership." "Then perhaps you should start with Ava's paperwork," I said, nodding toward her. "I already have," he replied, "which is why I'm here." Ava's composure wavered for the first time. She shot him a look meant to silence, but he ignored it. Price's tone softened. "Your husband wasn't an ordinary collector. The Providence Trail on the Vale paintings he handled stops abruptly 6 years ago, about the same time he purchased this property. Every record after that disappears. No customs filings, no storage documentation, no insurance renewals. As if the art simply evaporated. I could feel the house listening again, every beam aware. "I can't help you," I said quietly. "Maybe you can," he said. "Maybe you already are." His words landed like a small weight in the chest, not accusation, not threat, just gravity. After a long pause, I stepped aside. 5 minutes, I said. "You stay in the hall." He entered like someone accustomed to thresholds, careful not to touch, scanning the space with a professional's restraint. The air carried the faint scent of his coat. Rain, cedar, faint metal. "Nice place," he said softly. "Wind must sound like memory here." I didn't answer. He noticed the letter on the console table, the one in Vale's hand. "May I?" "No." He nodded, hands still at his sides. "You know, Mrs. Hart, there's a reason Vale fascinates people. Not because he vanished, plenty of artists vanish, but because of what he left unfinished. Half of the West Coast's art history feels like it's waiting for him to come back and finish the sentence." "Maybe he did," I said. just not in the way anyone expected. That made him look at me differently, not like a suspect, but like a witness he suddenly believed. "You've seen something," he said quietly. I didn't confirm, didn't deny. He stepped closer to the window where the Pacific glared back. "Whatever you found here, don't trust the people who tell you they're protecting culture. They're protecting ownership. Are you one of them?" I asked. His gaze met mine again. "Depends who's asking." The silence between us grew taut, not unfriendly, but charged, like static before rain. Then his phone buzzed. A short vibration. He glanced at the screen and exhaled. "Another site," he murmured. "Farther south. A storage unit linked to your husband's trust. I need to check it before anyone else does." He turned toward the door. "We'll talk again, Mrs. Hart. Soon." "Agent Price," I said as he reached for the handle. "If my husband really did have Vale's paintings, why come to me now? Why not when he was alive?" He paused, hands still on the door. "Because," he said, "we didn't know he'd found more than art." The door closed behind him, leaving his scent and his words like residue. Outside, Ava lingered near the cliff path, phone pressed to her ear. When she saw me watching, she turned away too quickly, retreating toward her car. I waited until both vehicles vanished into fog before locking the door again. The house settled around me, the quiet not peaceful now, but attentive. On the table, the letters looked smaller, fragile things pretending to be harmless. I picked up the one in Vale's hand and held it under the lamplight. The ink shimmered faintly, not black, but deep indigo, like the night before a storm. At the bottom of the page, beneath the signature, a faint embossed mark caught the light, a shape I hadn't noticed before. A small, spiraled wave, enclosed in a circle. I traced it with my thumb and felt a ridge, paint, not print, a mark Vale used on some of his later works, a symbol for the Pacific itself. It wasn't just a signature. It was a direction. I turned over the envelope. On the back flap, barely visible, were coordinates written in pencil. 36.574 degrees north, 121.943 degrees west. I entered them on my phone. A red pin appeared on the map, less than 2 miles south, along a jagged stretch of coast known for caves carved by the tide. The next hiding place, I changed into a windbreaker, pocketed the letter, and grabbed a flashlight. The air outside was dense with salt and the low, steady pulse of waves. The cliff path started narrow, then widened where the bluff dropped. As I walked, the sound of the sea deepened, a throaty rhythm, the same cadence Matthew used when thinking aloud. The fog licked the path, pale and cold. When I reached the coordinates, the land curved into a small cove shielded by rock. At low tide, a thin passage opened between 2 stone arches, a natural doorway. The flashlight beam caught something tucked in the crevice, a small tin box, half covered by kelp and sand. My heart pounded as I pried it loose. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay another letter, drier than the sea around it, protected by care. The handwriting was unmistakably Vale's, though rushed as if written in hiding. "If you're reading this, you followed the line he left you. Good. The truth isn't in the paintings, it's in the hands that held the brushes. Your husband found me before I died. He promised to keep my name quiet until the work could breathe again. But others are listening. Don't trust the galleries. Don't trust the bureau. The only person who can tell you what Matthew truly found is in the photographs behind the hearthstone. She's alive, and she remembers everything." The letter ended there, and signed, but the handwriting trembled, human and near. I stood in the cave's mouth, wind clawing through. The horizon a bruised violet. Behind the hearthstone, that meant home, the villa itself. I turned back toward the cliff path, heart pounding, the fog thickening until the world shrank to the radius of my light. When I reached the house again, the lights inside were already on. I froze. I hadn't left them that way. Through the window, a figure moved, a silhouette near the desk, back turned, head bent over Matthew's letters. The realization hit cold and clean. I wasn't alone. I killed the flashlight, slipped inside through the side door, and crept down the hallway barefoot, the floor cool underfoot. The figure's movements were methodical, not frantic, as if searching, not stealing. The lamplight brushed his face, just enough for recognition. Agent Price, except he wasn't wearing the bureau badge now. In his hand, a thin folder, the same indigo seal embossed on its cover. He looked up then, met my gaze, and instead of surprise, he smiled slightly, like someone caught in a lie he wasn't ashamed of. "I told you we'd talk again," he said softly. For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the slow, uneven metronome of waves striking the cliff below. He looked completely at home. Coat draped over a chair, sleeves rolled, the lamplight gilding his jaw. He had the unhurried posture of someone who didn't expect to be chased out. "You broke in," I said. He raised a brow. "Door was unlocked." "I locked it." "Then you have a better locksmith than you realize." I hated the small flicker of calm in his voice, hated more that I wanted to trust it. "What are you doing here?" "Finishing a conversation." "By reading my husband's letters?" He closed the folder slowly. "No, by protecting what he died trying to protect." There it was again, that certainty, that familiarity with my husband's motives, as if they'd once shared a language I was only now learning. "Who are you really, Agent Price?" He hesitated just long enough for truth to rearrange itself. "I'm Bureau," he said finally. "Your husband brought me in off books. I stayed on the inside to protect him. I felt the floor tilt under me. Hired you to locate Lucy and Vale." He said the name like it still mattered, like it was a man, not a myth. "You worked for him." "For both of you in a way," he said, "though you didn't know it." I stared at him, anger rising slow and bright. "Then tell me what he was doing. Why this house? Why the lies?" Price stepped closer, his voice low. "Matthew believed Vale was alive. He had reason to. He found fragments, new canvases, and signed, painted in a hand that was too precise to be imitation. He tracked the trail to California's coast. When the Bureau got wind of it, they thought he was running a smuggling ring. He wasn't. He was chasing bloodlines." Bloodlines. The word pulsed through me like a secret already known. "You mean family?" I said. He nodded once. "Vale had a child, a son, born under a different name. Your husband thought that son was him." Silence fell heavy between us. "I found proof tonight," I whispered. "In his letters. Photographs. He was right." Price exhaled long and quiet. "Then you know why everyone wants the paintings. They're not just art, they're confession. Vale documented his exile, his lovers, his child. Some of those canvases name people who are still alive. Powerful people." He set the folder on the desk. "That's why I'm here, Claire. Because if you've found one painting, you're already in danger." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the air in the room had grown too tight. "You expect me to believe the Bureau couldn't protect a widow on a cliff?" "I expect you to listen to your husband," he said quietly. "He built this place like a code. There are things here you haven't found yet. He trusted you to finish what he started. But he didn't want you to die doing it." He said it with such calm conviction that, for a heartbeat, I almost felt Matthew's voice in his. I turned away, needing distance, needing control. My reflection caught in the dark window pane. Pale, sharp, alive in a way grief hadn't allowed before. "Then tell me what comes next," I said. "First," he said, "we find what's behind the hearthstone." My stomach tightened. "You know about that?" He half smiled. "Your husband wasn't subtle. He left hints everywhere, even for me." We moved to the fireplace together. The embers were cold now, a faint scent of ash lingering. I knelt and ran my hand along the smooth bricks until my fingertips caught on one with a thin fissure along its edge. Price crouched beside me. "Here," he said, voice near my ear. His sleeve brushed my arm. That small, involuntary contact, sending a pulse of awareness through me that had nothing to do with fear. He pressed along the side of the brick, and with a soft click it shifted inward. A narrow recess opened, revealing a sealed tin cylinder wrapped in faded canvas. I lifted it out carefully. The canvas smelled faintly of smoke and salt. Inside, tightly rolled, was another painting, smaller than the first, colors still vibrant. A woman, standing at the water's edge, holding a palette. Her expression was intent, almost fierce. Behind her, a shadowed figure, veil, unmistakably, painted her as she painted him. The composition was impossible unless both existed in the same frame. A mirrored confession. At the bottom, a line of script. Mira, the light that never asked permission. My throat tightened. Matthew's mother again. Price watched me quietly. "He found her likeness before he found her name," he said. "That painting was the reason he came to me. He thought Vale had hidden messages in the pigments, coordinates, dates, maybe even names of the people who helped him disappear." He pointed to the margin. "See the underlayer? He used manganese blue, not common for that period. There's something beneath the surface." I turned toward him. "You can see that." He smiled faintly. "Comes with the job." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small UV flashlight. "May I?" I nodded. When he shone the beam across the canvas, faint lines appeared, not random, but deliberate, geometric. A map of the coastline, rendered invisibly in the underpaint. And there, marked by a single stroke of red, a spot inland from the villa. "Another hiding place," I murmured. "Likely the last one," he said. "Vale's final studio, maybe. Matthew was searching for it when he died." The words hit me harder than I expected. "You're saying he didn't just die of a heart attack?" Price hesitated. "His death was sudden, yes. But the Bureau report noted inconsistencies, timelines, missing digital records. Someone erased the last 6 days of his emails." I felt the floor shift again, a slow roll like the earth beneath the cliffs. "Who?" "That's what I'm trying to find out." He turned off the light, the darkness rushing back between us. For a moment, the only illumination came from the faint embers and the steady pulse of the sea outside. "You need to leave this house for a few days," he said. "Let me handle the rest." "I'm not leaving." "Claire." "This place is the only thing he left me that makes sense. You expect me to walk away from it because you can't guarantee safety." He looked at me for a long time. Then his voice dropped, softer, almost intimate. "No, I expect you to stay alive long enough to understand what he was trying to tell you." Something in the way he said it, restrained, protective, almost reverent, broke through the iron shell of my resolve. I stepped closer, studying him in the dim light. "Why do you care?" He met my eyes. "Because I knew him, and because you look at the truth the same way he did, like it's something that can save you." For a second, the air between us was charged, fragile, the kind of moment that doesn't belong to two strangers. I pulled back first. "If you're staying, you sleep on the couch. Tomorrow we go to the site." He smiled, small and tired. "Deal." I left him in the glow of the dying fire and went to the bedroom, though sleep didn't come. Through the half-open door, I could see him in the great room. Jacket off, sitting forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the painting propped against the hearth as if waiting for it to speak. When I finally closed my eyes, the ocean filled the house like breath. And beneath its rhythm, faint and certain, I could still hear him say, he promised to keep my name quiet until the work could breathe again. Outside, the fog thickened around Cypress House. Somewhere inland, past the dark line of cypress trees, the truth waited, painted, buried alive. And tomorrow I would find it. Dawn came in colors the ocean never promised. Pewter, then rose, then the pale gold that makes even grief look gentler. I found Price already awake, brewing coffee strong enough to restart heart. The scent reached down the hall like a memory I hadn't agreed to recall. "You don't sleep much," I said. He poured a second mug, handed it to me. "Habit. The bureau trains you to rest with your eyes open." We drank in silence, the surf thudding below. On the table between us, the smaller painting, Mira, the light that never asked permission, caught the newborn sun, the hidden map now faintly visible without the UV light. Price unfolded a topographic map beside it. The mark falls inland near the old quarry, abandoned in the 60s, fenced off now. 2 miles east. I traced the red stroke with my fingertip. So that's where he worked, where Vale hid the rest. He nodded, or where someone buried what he couldn't destroy. We drove after breakfast, the road curling through mist and eucalyptus. The world smelled of sap and salt and old promises. The quarry revealed itself as a scar, gray stone cliffs hollowed by time, a single rusted gate chained but not locked. Beyond it, silence that felt watched. Inside, gulls perched on ledges like punctuation marks. At the far end, half concealed by vines, an archway led into the rock. Price swept his flashlight across the entrance. Here. The beam fell on carved initials, LV, and below them a smaller set, MH. My throat closed. Matthew's mark, cut beside Vale's, as if claiming a lineage at last. We stepped inside. The air cooled instantly, moisture beaded on the walls. At the tunnel's bend, a door waited, with swollen, metal hinges gone green with salt. Price shoved it open. The room beyond was no myth. It was a studio, Vale's unmistakably. Canvases leaned against every surface, wrapped in linen, edges cracked but intact. Jars of pigment turned to crystal, brushes fossilized mid-stroke. And on a central easel, beneath a film of dust, an unfinished painting glowed with trapped light. A woman at a window, looking out toward a storm. Her features were uncannily close to mine, a likeness that felt like kinship, not coincidence. I staggered back. That's impossible. Price studied it, brow drawn. He painted her from memory, or from blood. I touched the edge of the canvas, afraid it might vanish. Then Matthew knew. He knew before I did. Price's voice was low. He found this portrait 6 years ago. He told me it proved Vale's line survived. Through Mira, through him, through you. Through me. The air thickened, metallic with truth. The brushwork trembled between tenderness and warning. Beneath the easel lay another tin cylinder, sealed with wax. Price cracked it open. Inside, a final letter, addressed not to Matthew, but to Claire Hart. The paper trembled in my hands. If you're reading this, then the silence kept you alive long enough to choose. They will come for these works because they fear what they reveal, that art remembers blood better than history does. Matthew found me, and I told him the truth. I did not die in 1983. I vanished because the men who funded my exhibitions also funded what I refused to paint. Portraits of power, lies sold as beauty. Mira helped me disappear. He was our son, and you are his answer. Keep the paintings where the sea can reach them. It erases everything but truth. Alvale. I read it twice until the words blurred. Price touched my shoulder lightly. You understand what that means. That my husband spent his life proving a rumor that ended in me. He nodded once, eyes dark, and that now the rumor will hunt you. We worked in silence, photographing each piece, sealing them in protective cloth. Outside, the wind gathered, carrying the smell of rain. When we stepped back into daylight, 2 cars waited at the gate, sleek, official, engines idling. Ava North stood beside them, flanked by men in suits. Her voice carried over the stone. Claire, please don't make this harder. The Bureau has authorized retrieval. I felt Price stiffen beside me. That's not Bureau, he murmured. Private contractors. They'll claim federal clearance, I said. He gave a grim smile. Then we'll claim the truth. We loaded the cylinders into the back of his car, just as the first drops fell. Ava shouted something drowned by thunder. Price hit the gas, gravel spitting, tires skidding onto the coastal road. Rain sheeted the windshield. Wipers beat like a pulse. I clutched the seatbelt, the sea flashing to our left in wild, silver bursts. Where are we going? I shouted. Somewhere they won't look, he said. Your husband planned for this. He left coordinates for a safe storage under the cliffs, an old Coast Guard shelter. He turned the wheel hard, tires biting into a narrow descent. The road wound through cypress and fog until the house appeared again, half erased by rain. Cypress House stood waiting, its windows catching lightning. Inside, we carried the cylinders down to the basement, an unfinished stone chamber smelling of salt and thyme. Matthew's handwriting marked a panel on the far wall, in the wall where water waits. I pressed the bricks. One section released with a sigh, revealing a hollow lined with steel. Price set the paintings inside, sealing them as another clap of thunder rolled through the cliffs. For a moment we stood there, soaked, breathless, staring at what we'd protected. Now what? I whispered. He looked at me, rain running down his face like something honest. Now we decide whether to keep hiding the truth or let it breathe. Something in the way, he said, we unraveled the last barrier inside me. Grief, fear, relief, they folded into a single, reckless impulse. I stepped closer. You don't sound like a man who believes in hiding. I used to, he said softly, until you opened the door. Lightning flashed again, painting us both in silver. We stood there, the sea howling through the cracks. Two people bound by someone else's ghosts and yet alive. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. Outside, the storm deepened, but inside Cypress House, something finally exhaled. The storm stayed all night. The roof sang, and the glass shook, and every heartbeat sounded like a door closing. I didn't sleep. Price didn't either. We sat on the floor beside the sealed wall, two people too tired for fear and too aware for peace. When dawn came, the world looked rinsed raw. The wind had calmed. The ocean turned the color of pewter again. I brewed coffee, he found bread, and for a few fragile minutes we looked almost ordinary. Then headlights cut through the mist outside. Ava north again, alone this time. She walked toward the house with the careful grace of someone who already knows she's lost. I opened the door before she could knock. She stood there dripping salt and apology. "Claire," she said, "please don't let them take it. They'll bury everything in warehouses. They'll say Vale never existed." Behind her, a black SUV idled. The bureau's crest gleamed faintly on its side. Two men waited inside, the kind of men who made silence a profession. "They're here for you, not me," she whispered. "They think Price went rogue." I turned to him. He didn't flinch. "They're not wrong," he said, "but they're late." He handed me a small flash drive, thin as a nail. Digital scans. Every letter, every image. Matthew started the archive. I finished it. Send it anywhere the truth still matters. Ava stepped closer, trembling. He wanted the world to see Vale's real work. That was the point all along. Outside, the agents began walking up the path. Price touched my arm. "Whatever happens, you don't open the wall. Let the sea keep what belongs to it." Then he went out to meet them. Words I couldn't hear passed between men who didn't know how to listen. One reached for his radio, the other for handcuffs. Price lifted his hands, calm, and in that moment he looked almost peaceful. They led him toward the car. He turned once, met my eyes through the rain-washed glass. No message, no farewell, just understanding. Ava stayed until the engines faded. Then she said, "He'll be all right. He's too stubborn not to be." She gave a small, broken laugh. "You should disappear for a while. Artists aren't the only ones who vanish." When she left, Cypress House felt larger than before, filled with echoes that didn't ache anymore. I packed a single bag, took the flash drive, and locked the gate behind me. Weeks later, in a quiet library in Santa Fe, I sat at a public computer and uploaded everything. Vale's letters, the photographs, the painting scans, to every open-access archive that would take them. Within hours, the files began to spread, multiplying faster than ownership could stop them. By evening, the name Lucien Vale trended again after 40 years of silence. Articles called it the Monterey Revelation. Scholars debated, museums postured, but none of that mattered. The art was free, and the truth was breathing. I stayed in Santa Fe through summer, renting a small apartment above a gallery. The desert smelled nothing like the sea, yet when wind crossed the adobe walls, it carried a rhythm I recognized. One afternoon, an envelope arrived, no return address, only a faint circular watermark of a wave. Inside, a single note in Price's hand. The Bureau let me go. They prefer ghosts to headlines. If you're still near water, you'll know where to find me. Folded with the note was a photograph. The Monterey cliffs, sunlit, and a figure standing near the edge. Not him, not Matthew, me, or someone who looked exactly like me, painted long ago in Vale's unfinished style. On the back, 2 words in faded ink, begin again. I returned to Cypress House in late autumn. The air smelled of salt and rosemary, the windows filmed with sea dust. I unlocked the door, half expecting ghosts, found only quiet. Down in the basement, the hidden wall still hummed faintly, as if the paintings inside were breathing with the tide. I left them there. Some truths belong to the elements. When night came, I built a fire and sat by the window where Matthew once worked. The Pacific was black glass under a slice of moon. I thought of Vale and Mira, of art and inheritance, of how love sometimes survives by changing its name. Outside, the water reached and retreated, whispering the same thing over and over until I finally understood. The story was finished, and I was still here to tell it,